So I'm very excited to get started. This is also, as you could probably tell from all of my communications, a topic I'm very excited about, how to work with ambassadors and influencers. But I also have to tell you that this is still a new area for me and for WOSM. So this is more of a discussion today. I'm going to share with you some of the things that I've learned in developing our strategy and approach to this and the little bit of work we've started. We'll hear from some colleagues who are also kind of new to this in the last year or two as well, and see what kind of work they're doing, because they each have very different approaches to it. And I'm sure that one of those will resonate with you and give you some inspiration of what you can get started with in the new year as well. So before I get started on this topic, I just want to make a few general announcements. First of all, I want to say hello and welcome to anybody who's at their first ever Global Scouting Communications Network meeting. We do have a lot of new members in the last month or two, so if this is your first one, welcome. We do meet on the last Thursday of every month, except in December when we'll meet earlier. And we have different capacity building topics, and we're also open to anything that people want to discuss and learn. So I am very open to receiving communications from any and all of you about what you would like to see get out of this group. I also want to let you know that if you go to scout.org/jobs right now, we do have quite a few openings at World Scouting, including 2 openings on the communications team, one for a manager in communications, and one for social media coordinator. So if you know anyone who is an excellent writer in English, and of course from the scouting community would be a huge bonus, then please do refer them to those jobs, or perhaps if any of you are interested as well, we would love to see your applications. So those are open for the next 3 weeks. And there's a couple of other jobs on the child safeguarding side of things and some openings at Kandersteg as well. Lastly, I would just like to mention that COP26 is coming up this week. So the Promise to the Planet campaign that we've been talking about for many months already is happening. Bear Grylls and delegation of Scouts will be at COP26 in Glasgow, and they will be representing the Scout movement there, which I think is a very exciting advocacy opportunity. If you don't have Scouts who have been participating in Promise to the Planet, you can still use this opportunity to highlight climate action and the way that Scouts are involved in that, and share what you see us posting or any delegates or NSOs posting about this, because I think this is a very exciting and high-level opportunity for youth spaces and voices to show up on an international platform. Okay, I think that's all for my announcements right now. It's a lot. So we're going to get started with the actual topic of the day. How to work with ambassadors and influencers. So we've done the general announcements. We're going to start with me. I'm going to talk for another 10 minutes or so about high level, what is influence marketing? What does it mean? What does it mean to be an influencer? Then you'll meet our panel and you'll hear their 3 examples of how they're working with influencers or ambassadors. And I'll do a bit of a conversation with them with some questions, but I also welcome your questions. So anything that comes up during, please just drop it in the chat, and I'll probably wait until the end and then come to all of the questions. And finally, I will share some tools and some next steps with you so that you are empowered to take this into your own hands and see how you want to run with this concept with your NSO. So pictured here on the right side, if you're not familiar, this is the first influencer that we've engaged at World Scouting. His name is A.Y. Young, and he is a musician and an SDG Young Leader appointed or chosen by the United Nations. He was a member of the Boy Scouts of America, and we've been engaging him to do a number of things with us on social media and also at events like the World Scout Youth Forum and Jota Joti. So I'll give some examples later. We did that. All right, so what is influence marketing? First of all, it's not a typo. I'm not calling it influencer marketing for a reason. The main reason is because I think that there's a bit of a misconception in media in terms of what it means to be an influencer. And we've come to think it's something very superficial. I think that there's a certain profile that an influencer is. It's somebody who's like into fashion, maybe. We might think of it of somebody that's just a bit vain even. But I don't think that that's the right perception. Of course, those people are influencers as well, and they can be very influential in a certain niche like fashion or and so on. But there are influencers everywhere and in every single niche, including in ours. So I think looking at it as influence marketing instead of influencer marketing helps us broaden our perspective. So we think about what it means to have influence. So basically, who are the influential people in our field and how can we leverage influence to help us get the word out about what we're doing and make sure that there's a positive perception of scouting and the Scout brand in the world. Influence can come from so many different avenues and tactics. You know, it's not only on Instagram and on YouTube. At a very local level, you can think of even, you know, who are influential parents in a community. It can be the leader of a parent-teacher association. It could be a coach that all the parents really love or that has a great impact on kids in that community. It could be a local business that helps fundraise for scouting in a certain community. Or if I look at what we've done before we even started using influence marketing in a more strategic way, is just user-generated content, which we've talked about in the past, or generating social proof by what Scouts are already doing out there. It's a different way of doing influence marketing because we're using the photos that they are sharing with us, for example, of course, with their permission, to show people that it's not just us telling you that scouting is great, Scouts are telling you it's great. And that's much more impactful than, you know, if I come to you as an employee of World Scouting and say, scouting is great. They're like, of course you're gonna say that. They wanna hear it directly from the people who are benefiting. All right, so then if we talk about who an influencer is, this is the sort of formal definition of it. It's somebody who has the power to affect purchasing decisions. In that case, for us, it means making the decision to join scouting. And that can be because of that person has a certain authority, knowledge, position, or in most cases, relationship with an audience. So I think that's what happens in many cases. And you might leave today and start thinking about the people you follow on Instagram that maybe you don't consider are influencers, but they're people who you really want to listen to what they have to say. You don't know them in any personal way, shape, or form. You've never met them, but you really do, you know, want to listen when they're talking. So these people are influencers. They usually have a following that's in a distinct niche that they're very actively engaged with, meaning it's not just them posting, they're also replying to people's comments. If they get direct messages, say on Instagram, then they're responding to them. They're replying to comments on their YouTube videos and so on. Any type of engagement with their audience, two-way street. And they have the ability to inspire action among their audience. In traditional marketing, that'll mean they have the power to make people buy things because they're using them. In our case, we're looking at who can convince people to stay in scouting or join scouting or volunteer for scouting, or maybe even donate. So we have to look at them as social relationship assets, meaning they have relationships with their community, whether that's online or a local community that is very special, that people tend to trust in a way that they will never have that same relationship necessarily with WOSM, which might seem very far to them, or even with the NSO, which they might not know much about because they just are part of their local group and they don't know that much outside of it. So we want to look for the people who do have close relationships with them and leverage that influence to help us build better sense of community and belonging. I also like to point out that an influencer doesn't need to have 1 million followers. And in fact, some of the things I'll share with you will show you that they actually don't have that much of a greater impact if they do have 1 million followers. And that's because the more nano or micro influencers, like you'll see on the screen here, they tend to actually have a higher engagement rate, meaning that there are more people engaging with their content. There's a few reasons for that. And I think probably the biggest one is that smaller communities tend to be newer so that they are still engaged after a few years versus somebody that you've maybe followed for 10 or 15 years, you may have fallen off. or you're maybe not as close to that cause anymore. And because when you have a bigger following, of course, there's just a lot more people competing for your attention. And so, yeah, the engagement rate, the number of people who like, comment, and share those posts actually tends to be higher as a percentage for people with between 0 and 10,000 and 10,000 and 100,000 followers. That's for Instagram specifically. So this is why if you've ever heard of any, like the terms micro influencer or nano influencer, these are also very important. All right, so why is this important? I'll just give you a couple of quotes because I think it's quite impactful. We know, especially since the pandemic in 2020, social media usage soared. I don't think that's news to anybody, but Instagram usage rose by 40% at the height of the pandemic when the restrictions were more serious. And this really changed how people shop online, which I know we're not a store, but we have to be able to apply these lessons to what we do in the nonprofit world, because they don't do studies on us, they do studies on the for-profit industry. And that just means that people are making more of their buying decisions online than they used to. So we want to have a greater presence in the online spaces and whatever trends are popping up online. So that also means that, and those trends when it comes to buying happen because people are trusting and kind of building loyalty in these online communities with influencers. And in fact, they say that in this one study, they said that 92% of people trusted individuals over brands, even when they didn't know the individual. And I think that that's fair because we do tend to connect emotionally more to another face than to a person talking about their experience than to somebody who works for a brand or a commercial telling you what to do. So influencers have established a positive and long-term relationship with their followers. So it's only natural that they're going to be key in helping gain the trust of consumers. And they call that emotional marketing, which basically means, you know, it's a personal relationship. Now I'll talk about why it is important for scouting specifically. Also, if you guys have questions that pop up, please use the chat and leave them as I go. So in terms of scouting, there's a few marketing concepts here that show that when we adopt influence marketing, it allows us to demonstrate shared values, or if you ever heard the term brand affinity, that's what it means. Like, it means that we're more relatable to scouts and also to non-scouts, depending on the influencer that we're using. It helps increase willingness of our audience to trust and buy into our brand. So that's the concepts of brand equity and credibility, or building social value in these groups. Allows us to build longer term relationships and sense of belonging along the movement, two things that I think are very important to all of us, because long-term relationships mean we're retaining more scouts, and sense of belonging also contributes to, of course, retention in the long term. Generating more social proof for WOSM or for your NSO's brand. And that's exactly what I was talking about earlier, the photos of people benefiting and enjoying your services. And finally, attracting a new audience, which is going to translate into attracting new scouts and growing the movement. The added benefit to all of that as well, and one of our main goals, is to generate quality content in form of photos and videos through our influencer networks. Of course, on the right side, you will find a face we all know, Bear Grylls, the Chief Ambassador for World Scouting, with a scout at the World Scout Jamboree. All right, one more note on what influence means in scouting. The photo here you may recognize is also the group of scout ambassadors used by UK Scouts. They have a lot of adventurers, Olympians, Paralympians that they use in representing the scout movement in many different ways, and you'll find them some great examples on their website and social media pages. But I do want you to think about what influence means in scouting, and it would come back down to our values as scouts. So some of the things that we would want to use influence for include inspiring a sense of belonging among scouts to a large, in your case, national, in our case, global movement that's exciting, adventurous, educational, and creating a better world. We're promoting youth empowerment, youth-led action, community service, outdoors, well-being, and friendship. So any influencers that you find should embody one or several of those sort of values, if that's what you're looking to replicate. If they don't fit with these, they're not going to be a good influencer for the brand because they're not going to be speaking to your audience. So this is another photo from one of the video clips with AY Young, the musician I was mentioning earlier. When it comes to influencer profile, what really matters when you're choosing who it is that their community reacts favorably to their recommendations. So you do want to look at how that person engages with their audience and if people are responding, or, you know, in some cases, unfortunately, people are have a bit of a fake following. There are a lot of bots and so on. So is it actually an engaged community in any way, shape, or form? You also want to look at true brand enthusiasts. So in this case with AY Young, we actually got into a conversation on Instagram, and he was just so excited about scouting and about the potential to work with us. He was without a doubt a brand enthusiast, and he already embodied a lot of the values that we're looking for in terms of, you know, the SDGs specifically, which I think was a very lucky thing for us that he is an SDG young leader, and we were looking for someone to help with the Scouts for SDGs promotion. And yeah, he's all about, you know, saving the planet. All of the lyrics to his songs really embody the same language that we use in scouting. So when you find those enthusiasts, you want to work on cultivating a rock solid relationship with them, and you want to leave room for them to be the genius creators they are at their core, because they're already out there creating content. You don't want to try to change the way that they speak or engage with people. You really want to let them be them. And you know, you'll share with them some key messages, some do's and don'ts perhaps, but really let them to their creative genius. And in that sense, you will embrace your audience in an authentic voice. And that's how emotional marketing works, because you will provoke emotion in them that makes them want to take action, whether that means, you know, be more involved in scouting, stay in scouting, volunteer in scouting, or join scouting. Okay, I'm gonna move on to, like, the rest of what I have here is a bit more strategic, and all of this I'm actually going to share with you at the end in a document on Monday that we're going to add to the WOSM services platform that has like samples of our strategy and even our agreement that we sign with influencers, so that you have all of those pieces and you can copy paste whatever works for your NSO, because I want to leave lots of time to chat with our panelists. So meet our panel. As I mentioned earlier, we have a representative from Brazil, from the Netherlands, and from South Africa. All three are wonderful humans and are doing some really great work in their NSOs. And I want to start with the first example from Brazil, because I think it's maybe the more traditional example that we have when we think about influencers on Instagram. They're specifically working with micro-level influencers or nano-level influencers, meaning the following won't be in the millions. It'll probably be under 10,000 in most cases. A few of them have a bit more, I think. And yeah, and they're actually using Scouts to give the message to Scouts. And these are people who are already doing these things online that they developed relationships with. So Julia, I'm going to pass it over to you. I'll let you share your screen.
Hi, okay. Just a moment. Yeah, can you see it?
Yes, thank you.
Great. So everybody, hi. As Lenny already said, I am Julia. I am the digital content creator here at Brazilian Scouts. And today I'm going to show you a little bit of how we use micro-influencers to make a macro impact on our associates. So basically, it all started with our communication plan. After the approval of our communication plan for 2021 and 2022, we aimed to use the voice of the youth as the voice of the institution. because if we say that the Scout movement is a movement made for and by the youth, we believe that there's nothing more logical than the NSOs starting to speak through the youth. So that's why we chose to focus on that. As you may imagine and have seen, the whole micro-influencers boom happened during the pandemic, which was the moment we began a teamwork to map all these young scouts who were already promoting and doing a great job promoting and scouting topics on their online communities. But of course, before that, we already had some scouts who were acting mainly as YouTubers, from which we highlight Miranha Scout, which is this one on the left side. And he has almost 2,000 subscribers on YouTube. And we also highlight Canal Saps, the Felipe, the one in the right side. He has over 30,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is already a lot of people. Both are able to gather a really good audience, as you may see. But at the time, we haven't had any official communication initiatives with them. And it didn't happen until we saw ourselves in a position of having to move everything into the online environment. That was the moment that the work with the influencers became essential for us to keep up with our associates. So our first institutional video with the young influencers was with Miranda and was exactly about it, how to take action during the Earth Hour and make an impact from home. So you can see here, I brought some highlights. You can see here as a comparison, the IGTV we used, the influencer, we had over 4,000 views and over 800 likes. And the other IGTVs we used to share on our Instagram page, we didn't have that much interaction at all. So we had just like 500 views, which is a very big difference. So from that moment on, we realized the power of literally giving the youth a voice inside of institutional channels. And we adopt them, the young influencers, as so-called spokespeople of the Brazilian Scouts. Not just on Instagram, but also on Facebook and YouTube. But of course, due to the algorithm and due to the fact that Instagram was the birthplace for influencers, we have much better insight and greater interaction on Instagram. But we have used them already. For example, we have used them already on social media to promote the He for She initiative and Todos pela Saúde, which was a project, a Brazilian project funded by a Brazilian bank aiming to fight COVID-19. But we also worked with them to disclose events such as the online editions for Jamboree we did during the pandemic, and another institutional projects such as the release of our new website and annual reports and annual themes as well. For example, here we have the He for She initiative insights. We had some very good insights, over 11,000 views, 1,500 likes, and more than 400 shares, which is far more shares than we were expecting for this. And which something else that was very nice we did with them was to ask the boys, we requested the boys to take pictures showing their support to the He for She initiative and to post on their own profile channel, on their own profiles on Instagram. And it was very nice. It was we saw that they were engaging really well on that. So we have a WhatsApp group on where we can always ask them to post something on their channels or even to film a specific video for us to use on our channels, which is very nice. This is another print screen of some insights we have when we used them to talk about the release of our new website, our new institutional website. So we had over 7,000 views, almost 1,500 likes, which is very a lot of things, a lot of shares and a lot of comments as well. And most of the time we give them a script, but depending on the subject, we just give them a briefing of what's expected, and we leave them free to go spontaneous, which is very nice as well, and which would make the scouts engage a lot more when they see that there's no script and stuff, and they are just doing what they were already doing before they even start the influencers thing. So it's very nice. And as did the WOSM, we also released our TikTok page during the pandemic, and the work with the influencers was pretty much essential to that, because we asked them to produce some videos so we could use over time, so we could post over time, and they were brilliant on that. They are very engaged, and they really like to be on the channels, which is very nice. They want to be there, they want to engage, they want to show their own service, and they are very willing to suggest subjects and topics, and just share on our pages and share on their pages as well. And on YouTube, we have been using the influencers to take part on our opening ceremonies of the events we have made, such as they did like the last great event we had before the pandemic. We also used we already used influencers to be part of the opening ceremony, which is Juncam at the beginning of 2020. So we have been using them on YouTube as well, like this. And yeah, I think that's basically it. I was maybe too quick, but I hope you get the chance to understand. And this is my contact, so if you might be interested in exchanging some other insights on this topic, feel free to contact me, please.
Thank you so much. No, I think that was great and perfect length and content. This is such a great approach. And I will just say, for context for other people, that Brazil in general has a very, very high social media usage rate compared to most countries. It's usually the testing ground country that Instagram and Facebook use when they're launching new things. It was one of the first places to get reels and so on. So they get to be a little bit ahead of the curve, which allows them to sort of set some trends and give some examples for the rest of us as well. But it's something that we can kind of look to and aspire to as a little bit. Also say that because they had this established group of influencers already, and they have a WhatsApp group with them, it's very easy for them to reach the influencers when they have something. Hey, is anybody available to help us with this? They helped us a lot with our launch of our TikTok channel, which is still very much in its infancy, but the vast majority of submissions we got were from Brazilian scouts because they were already creating content in Portuguese. They just translated content for us to post in English. So it showed that it was a very efficient way to reach influencers and to work with people who are already doing this work. Next up, we're going to get Natasha to talk about the program in South Africa. I want her to talk now because there's a fear that she might lose power, unfortunately. Natasha, I'll pass it to you. Oh, you're just on mute to you.
There we go. Unmute. Oops, sorry, wait, this is my whole screen now. Never mind. So our program is a little bit different. Well, actually, it's quite different to how you do it in Brazil. We also wanted to raise our profile and grow our movement and increase the sustainability of scouting in South Africa. But before we went ahead with that, we had a look at our membership, because in South Africa we have 90,000 members, 5,000 volunteers, but most of them live in rural and disadvantaged communities, which means that access to data is very expensive in South Africa. Access to Wi-Fi and electricity is sometimes a challenge. And also our membership is very varied. So we couldn't quite identify young influencers that could speak on behalf of everybody and we could be representative for everybody. So we decided to flip the switch a little bit, and we thought, well, what if we try to empower young people to become influencers? So what if we train young people from all our various regions, and we teach them how to write for social media, and we teach them a little bit more about how social media works. And then they can learn by doing the Scout way on our regional Scout platforms and their own private platforms. And then that way get the message to their local communities with whom they have relationships, or people that will be able to relate to the stories that they are telling because it is in their community. So the objective of our program was really to train these young members to enhance our profile both within the communities and online. Also to retain and motivate members, because during COVID it was difficult to keep our membership going, and if people would see that certain initiatives that were taking place in their communities, that it might just also encourage them to continue with the Scout program. So we identified young people that we were going to teach how to write, how to share, how to promote these impact stories on our regional website. So in South Africa, we have 9 provinces, and each province has a their own website where they share their own stories, their own resources, and their own competitions. We also trained our people, or we call them our youth influencers, to upload stories and upload SDG and Messengers of Peace projects onto the onto the WOSM website, because it was a bit of a challenge for some of them to access the website, and our influencers could do it on their behalf. So how we went about this was we identified, like you were saying, Lynn, earlier, what is an ambassador and what is a youth influencer. So for us, the influencers are really people that promote the impact of Scouting by sharing the stories and sharing what's happening on their regional channels, so within their provinces, because they can then also speak to their peers and speak to parents of peers that might just be encouraged to let their children join. Now in South Africa, we have the legislation that you can't put pictures or content from children online without parental consent. So that's why our requirements to be a youth influencer were that you have to be 18 to 26 years of age. You have to be able to communicate and write in English. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you have to have a basic knowledge. You also need to have a basic understanding of social media, and you have to have a cell phone and be able to source email and WhatsApp stories and images, because we still have a large group of our population that don't have computers at home and that they communicate through their phones. And then obviously they needed to be enthusiastic about Scouting and be wanting to share the stories and get excited about what other people do in their communities. So we put out a call for our influencers, and we reviewed the applications. We did ask them to write motivation so we could see how they write and why they were enthusiastic about it. And then we got financial support from the World Scout Bureau to train the youth, and we had 4-day training over 4 Saturdays. Lynn, you helped us with social media marketing. And then from the Africa office, Mr. Sandrizi and Madame Kosi helped us with explaining the Messages of Peace and the SDG program to the young people. We had a photographer come and talk about impactful photographs. So what photographs would work, what wouldn't work on social media. I went through a chapter with them about, Scout South Africa's communication plan and, what we expect from them, and also what it means to represent Scouting, and that they're not actually only representing their communities, but they're also representing the World Scout movement in general. And then we did the online Safe from Harm training, your course, and then we did our own Safe from Harm procedures here in South Africa as well. And the last chat that we had with them was about copyrights and the legislation about using images of children and not just sharing things, but getting permission before you share things with others. We do have formal role descriptions that we've made for them, but we do it for all our volunteer positions. And there's a number of deliverables and expectations. They are different, and I'll explain that just now. They sign an agreement with us. So if things do go a little bit pear-shaped, then the same procedures that would apply to our other volunteers would apply to them, and we could sort of tweak the actions if needed. They are appointed for 2 years, of which the last 6 months are in a mentorship role, which means we will then start looking for new influencers. And the idea is really to see with whom they engage. So who engages with our influencers, who gives a lot of comments and a lot of feedback, who wants to share content with them. And those would sort of be the influencers that we would then target going further, because we know that they're already keen to engage on social media. So the deliverables that the youth influencers have is, so a lot of them are either studying or they're starting out in life, or they're pack scouters or they're rovers, and we didn't want to put too much pressure on them in the beginning. So we've asked them to deliver 2 stories a month, which includes photographs that they then share on the regional blogs. Some of them get shared nationally. They need to share 2 to 4 posts monthly of what they see happening in their communities. They need to promote communication campaigns. So for example, Promise to the Planet is something that they're promoting at the moment. And we've made it very clear to them that they are not ambassadors, they are our influencers, which means that if there are media queries that come to them, that they need to refer to either their regional or national teams. And then we're really trying to get seen in our communities, because we have realized that is a challenge, that scouting is often not seen. So we are also encouraging them to promote the Purple brand as much as they can. Our expectations from them are different to the deliverables, in the sense that we do expect them to live the Scout values both online and offline. And because they are not influencers in the sense that they're promoting the impact of Scouting, they're not promoting a product, but a lot of our influencers might be approached by companies, because we do get approached by companies to promote their product or their service on Scouting's platforms. So we made it clear that they cannot accept any money or any donations in kind if they are a Scout South Africa influencer. If they're doing it on their own behalf, that's one thing. But if they cannot promote a product on our platforms or in name of Scouting, obviously if they've got endorsement from our CEO and our Chief Scout, that's a different thing. But that's an initiative that they can't take themselves, and that they just need to be aware that they're representing Scouting in general. And that's sort of in a nutshell what we've done with our influencers. So, and at the moment we have 13 that are actively writing stories, and they're very varied and they're a lot of fun. So that's about it for me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think this is a very unique and innovative approach. So thank you for taking the time to share that. You also brought up one good point, which is about and being an influencer versus an ambassador. And I didn't touch on that at the beginning. I think that those lines are a little bit blurry between what an influencer versus an ambassador is, but there is a very important difference. And as you mentioned, they cannot speak to media on your behalf. I would say that in most cases, perhaps not all, we wouldn't consider an influencer can speak about us, not on behalf of us. Whereas an ambassador is somebody that we would, just the way that an ambassador of a country can speak on behalf of the country, you know, that they could speak on behalf of the movement in a way. Of course, even then there's training and there are talking points and there are rules about how that works. But that's one of the key differences. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again, and we're going to pass the mic to our final panelist, Kim from Scouting Netherlands. One moment. Okay, you can see my screen. Okay, I called this section Scouting for an Ambassador because Kim is going to talk about the perspective of actually having an ambassador versus an influencer, which is a little bit different. Still very new. They announced their chief ambassador just last month, actually. So Kim, tell us a little bit more about that. Oh, I am not hearing you. Are you guys hearing? Not hearing you. We did test this and it worked. No, unfortunately not. Okay, I have lost Kim. Okay, not just me. I wasn't sure if this was my computer freezing or what happened. Okay, well, in that case, we can start having some discussion, and if Kim rejoins us, then we can hear her presentation. So her perspective is very interesting. She's going to talk about their new chief ambassador, but I'll leave that to her. And if you have questions, perhaps we can address the one question that was already dropped in the chat, which is about compensation. Natasha did touch on that, but I would say also for WOSM's perspective, we make it very clear in our agreement with influencers and ambassadors that there is no remuneration for this exchange. We are a nonprofit organization and it's done on a voluntary basis, 100%. We do send influencers like a package of Kim is back, good. We do send them a package that they can use to, like from the World Scout shop. So just so that they have Scout branded things that they can use when they're making videos and photos and so on. But that's pretty much the extent of it. And then I would just say that who knows what the future holds in terms of like perhaps, you know, using some budget to make sure that we can have people with a large influence, say on YouTube or Instagram, attending certain events so that they can help elevate what's happening in the world and encourage more people to participate in those events. I don't know if Natasha or if anyone else on the wants to add anything about that aspect of compensation.
It's exactly the same here, Lynn, with us. They don't, our influencers don't get compensation, but see, the influencers are all Scouting members. So for them, being able to share what other Scouts do is sort of, a lot of them see it as a privilege, and they're very excited to be able to represent their communities and share what happens in their communities.
Yeah.
So no, we also, they know that it's on a voluntary basis. And so far, nobody has, we do give them data. I must admit, we do pay for data for those who cannot afford it. So we do have Scouts in very rural areas that cannot afford data. So we provide the data to them so they can actually do the stories and share the stories.
Yeah, which I think is excellent and an important accessibility piece, especially for South Africa, where access to data is not very equal, right? So that's good. Kim, can we see if we can hear you now?
Yes, does it work now?
Yeah, we hear you now. Great.
Okay, well, good.
All yours.
All right. Well, we are working with an ambassador very recently, since September. And it's a very fun thing what happened actually, because our patroness is the Queen. The royals have been our patrons for decades now, and the Queen turned 50 in May. And one of our volunteers replied to us on our on us congratulating the Queen on her birthday, saying, well, yes, it's very fun to have her as a patroness, of course, but Freek Vonk is a professor in the Netherlands who has a lot of TV shows and stuff. And why aren't you an ambassador for Scouting? And then he replied to us saying, well, that would be fun. Let's have a cup of coffee. And then the next thing, I sent him an email, or his company. And well, here we are. So it all happened on a tag on Twitter, basically, which was really fun, by one of our volunteers, not by Scouting Nederland, so not the NSO, because I think it wouldn't work if we would do it ourselves. Well, this is him. Freek Vonk is how you pronounce it, and he is a professor in evolutionary biology of reptiles, and he travels the world for TV shows, has a theater show, and also his own magazine about all creatures of the world, and he's the most popular TV host amongst children. So, well, that made it, the decision to appoint him as our chief ambassador very easy. And we hope he will help us make Scouting more modern, or the view on Scouting in the Netherlands, because a part of our Dutch inhabitants think we're kind of old-fashioned, doing making fires, making knots. But that's really not who we are. It's a small part of what we do, as you all know. But yeah, we have many desires to work with an ambassador or influencers, but so little time to do it all. But this basically, it crossed our path, and one thing led to another. And right now, we're still figuring out with him, with his company, to how we're going to cooperate in the future, or because we worked on the launch in September, and yeah, from now on, we're going to see what he's going to do for us and what we're going to do together. Because it's also very new to him. He doesn't work for an organization such as ours. He never did before. So it's really, yeah, together we're looking for a good way to do fun stuff together.
Awesome, thank you. I find this example very interesting for a couple of reasons. One is that he is actually very popular with like very young people, Kim was telling me. So even at the Cub Scout level, an influential person, which I don't think there's that many influencers at that age group. There's not as many, or maybe there are, and I just don't know. I don't know. But I think that that's really interesting. But also that he wasn't a scout, but he was very moved when he visited their scout center, and it fit his values anyway. So he decided that he wanted to get involved. And I think that's, of course, very welcome, but I don't think it would always work. So it's always a case by case basis, you know, if who is going to be a good fit and who isn't. So I don't think we would say yes every time, but for an opportunity like this with somebody that is this high caliber in the Netherlands, that it's really worthwhile. There was also, Kim, you mentioned that there was a survey done that showed that kids said if they could pick anybody to be their teacher, it would be him, right?
Yes, yeah, they did research, and then yeah, that came out amongst a lot of other famous influencers in the Netherlands. Also, yeah, macro influencers. And yeah, he really stands for education and amazement. Otherwise, he won't work with an organization who does the same thing. But that's what scouting is as well. So yes, that worked out really well.
Super. Dave, you want to add something?
Yeah, more of a question, Kim. I'd be keen to know at this early stage what kinds of opportunities you're starting to discuss with him and explore for the future.
Well, right now we have a scouting estate in the middle of the country, and we're building a big house, an adventure house for children to go camping in nature as well. Also for children who are handicapped, so who can't sleep in a tent, so they can sleep in the building. And it's almost ready, and we're going to open it in April. And we want him to do the opening or do a show with kids. We also have a large national Sea Scout camp next summer with almost 4,000 Sea Scouts together, and he's probably going to do something there as well.
Yeah. That's great. And Dave also reminds me that we also, we're trying to find ways for our ambassadors and influencers to work together when it comes to NSO levels and WOSM levels. So we did reach out to Bear to let him know about this, and then he wrote a letter congratulating and welcoming their chief ambassadors. I think that's also a nice thing to think about, is how NSOs can collaborate with WOSM and with each other, even on these, in different regions, or when world events start happening again.
Yeah, he was super excited about the letter from Bear.
Of course, yeah. That's great. Thank you, Kim, for sharing. We only have 5 minutes left. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or to drop them in the chat. I prepared more questions, but we won't get to all of these. The one I think that we should get to is perhaps about approaching influencers and about formalizing relationships. If we can just take a couple minutes to talk about this, because Susanna mentioned in the chat that she has tried to reach out before to influencers and did not get a reply. Both in the case of AY Young and with Kim reaching out to Freek, it happened on social media exchanges, but public ones, not direct messages. That's not to say that you can't reach people through direct messages. You definitely can, but they will, they're going to get a lot of messages probably depending on who you're reaching out to, and it could just get lost in there. A lot of them in their bios will have like an email address that you can reach out to for these requests, but it really helps if somebody knows them or if there's an in somewhere as well. So I don't know if you were talking, Susanna, about examples where they are scouts who are already doing things, or if they're just scouts like who have large followings but aren't really doing scout specific things. It really depends. It's very individual, but if anybody wants some support or has ideas of people they're trying to reach and can't, or any questions about just to chat influencers, ambassadors, you can reach out to me as well, and I can see how I can support you. I see quite a few comments now. So yeah, Simon is congratulating Kim. Also, Simon, if you want to add anything about your work with ambassadors, that could be interesting as well. And if you have anything to say about how you approach them, perhaps that could be helpful.
So the point I made in the chat just now was that the best way to get influencers is to ask your existing influencers to do the work for you. Famous people like being asked by famous people. Now, I know that only works when you have a good core of people to work from, but it's a pretty good method. All of our new influencers and ambassadors come get a letter from Bear, and that usually works.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because everyone's famous in their own field, but you forget. So we've got a good crop of ambassadors, but the thing they're all impressed by is our astronaut. So they're all very rich and famous, but none of them, except one, have been into space. And so they're all really impressed by Tim. And they all have their own markets. So use your ambassadors to reach out to new ambassadors and use them to work the best ways forward. That's usually the best way of doing it.
Yeah, really good point. Thank you for sharing that. I saw Marcelo also wrote in the chat from Brazil that you also have an ambassador who's a TV host. You did mention this to me last week, but who is only really popular with adults more his age because his TV program doesn't run anymore. I think it's again like a great example of how different people are going to work for different purposes. And when you're starting out, I really recommend that you are very, first of all, make a wish list. So I'll move to my last slide because I give you some ideas of what to do next. Make a wish list of basically any potential influencer you could see being great in your country. Go ahead and just write every name you can think of, take a few team members together and do that brainstorm. That's great. But then you also need to write down what are your goals, like what is your primary goal? And one thing that happens in scouting a lot is we want to reach everybody, scouts and non-scouts and parents and potential volunteers and potential donors. But in marketing, we really need to be specific with our goals. So you can't do everything. You can't be everyone to everyone, not right away. So start with one goal. If one of your main goals in your NSO right now is to retain members, then you're going to look, that'll be your first goal. If it's to grow your membership, then you can look that way. That matters a lot because it'll help you decide who from that wish list that you want to reach out to first, depending on your goals. Because if it's that you want to reach people who are not scouts to get new members, that might look different than if you're trying to reach somebody who is very much in the scouting community to help you retain and build that sense of community among your membership. All of these goals are good ones and are important, but you do need to have an idea of what you're looking for. If you have ideas for influencers, by the way, who can represent us at the World Scouting level, we'd be super happy to hear from you. We're growing those relationships right now. We're working with Julia and Marcelo in Brazil to work on that with some of the English and Portuguese speaking influencers. That's sort of our next step, but then we want to grow into other regions outside of Inter-America. So we'd love to hear from you. If you're looking for support, I encourage you to use the Global Scouting Communications Network. As I said, I'm not exactly an expert on this yet. We're all working and like learning by doing, right? So it's actually a great place to go and brainstorm together. We've had a couple of good examples of people posting there and getting different feedback from different people. Some of us will have experience, others will have great ideas. So post your questions and your ideas there, and we'll try to generate some conversations. If ever you just want to hop on a call with me and brainstorm, I'm happy to do that as well. And if you can share your experiences and lessons as you start to reach out to potential ambassadors, as you start to develop those relationships, any milestones you reach, let us know about them so that we can all benefit from those lessons together. I am going to share with you a few tools, probably by Monday, which we're going to add to WOSM services. So currently, currently you can already find this guide to working with Scout ambassadors on the site, which is actually a very useful guide they put together that partnerships can put together based on their experience recruiting and working with Bear Grylls. But I'm going to add a new tool, which is WOSM's Influence Marketing Guide. And that'll include a lot of the things I talked about earlier in terms of like what influence means in scouting, what to look for in an influencer, a little bit of guidance in terms of how to set your goals for influence marketing, and some really useful strategic pieces. So if you have any questions about those new tools, you can reach out to me directly, or you can post in the Global Comms Network group. I'm also going to share there a sample agreement for working with influencers so that you can adapt that agreement however you see fit for your NSO. This is also something that was brought up by the panelists because it's very, very important, especially right now with new data legislation in Europe. I think we're going to have to look at that and see how that impacts all of this work that we're doing with user-generated content and so on. We are Scouts. We need to behave with integrity. That means we always need to have permission for everything that we share and be very, very clear with our influencers that they are represented. If they are representing scouting, that they have to, of course, appear and behave and speak a certain way. So this sample agreement will give a list of examples of things that the person would agree to. In most cases, we're not really stressed that they're going to do something terrible, but if they do, we need to have some sort of something to fall back on and say, well, this is against our agreement and we no longer work together if that happens. So as always, a ton of information I'm throwing at you. I hope it's useful. If anyone has remaining burning questions right now, I can always stay on a few more extra minutes, but I want to respect all of your time and leave you there. So, oh, I see so many more chat messages. Yeah, that's great. So yeah, I think this is the beginning of a discussion, not the end. I hope that you'll find all these new tools useful, but I hope that you can continue the discussion, whether that's with me or with your other colleagues. Don't hesitate to reach out. And Dave, do you want to say some final?
Yeah, maybe just a final invitation. We're winding down the year. This has been, I think, a highly successful network from its inception, maybe close to a year ago. And a big thanks to Lynn and a former volunteer, Nika, who was heavily involved in setting up this network. I really want to invite everyone here back to the final session in December. It'll be much more informal. You can bring a coffee and hopefully we can do some breakout groups and really try to unpack how this group is working for people. And I'd love to get some discussions going about the kinds of sessions that you'd like to see being run in 2022. So please come back for that session. And we have another one on the COP26 and Promise to the Planet in November. But I'm really keen to get some feedback and insights into what's working here as we wind down the year and hit refresh for January next year.
Yeah. And I think also it would be great to see some NSO. I mean, we can see here that there are clearly great experiences and expertise among, even though none of our panelists all refuse to call themselves experts in the topics, but I think that we can say they have a certain expertise here, that they, that we want to use that more. So we want to know what the things are that you have learned in the last year, and you can share that in one of these monthly sessions. So it doesn't have to be led by WOSM. It can be led by NSOs as well, and we would love to see that. So please approach us if you have ideas. Yeah. Yes, experts. Special thanks to Kim, Natasha, Julia. You really gave some great contributions today. We really appreciate it. I hope everyone has a wonderful day or evening, and we'll get together again next month. See you soon.